So today I'm going to go over the midterm. I'm going to take it step by step, and to save time in typing, I put in a lot of the material. I put in all the function prototypes. I've added two constants, and I put in pi as the third constant in here. The constants I put in was a minimum and maximum. Now that isn't anything that you needed to do, but this is the way I did it so I could show you how easy it is to make a change, add another menu item by using these constants over here. So you can see these are all the functions that we needed in here. So this is going to display the menu. This is going to get a selection based on a minimum and maximum, which I've done minimum and sentinel in there because that actually is the maximum. But you could have used minimum and maximum if you wanted. It doesn't really matter. Then we're processing the selection based upon what get selection returns. Get number is a function that's strictly going to get a number greater than 0. Then we have our check if even and is even. Check if even is going to get a number and then check to see if it's even or odd. Getting the area of a rectangle involves getting the length and the width and multiplying the getter. Getting the radius was very simple. It just gets a radius. And getting a circumference is going to get the diameter, and it's going to get the pi and multiply as pi d in there. So let's start off right off the bat here is I put a few things in here that says choice equals 0 and process choice equals true. So what I've done here is I'm going to get selection. So let's go to get selection in here, and let's write that code right now. It's really fairly simple. So what I'm going to first do is here's get selection, and what I did was put in an integer here and a return statement. So just to save a little bit of time in here, remember when you do a function prototype and then you create the function definition for the prototype, it's going to do return 0. So always want to make sure that you're putting in what you're actually going to return. So let's start off very simple is we need something to determine if the information's valid. Now this isn't the only way to do it. This is the way I do it, and I feel it makes it the most clear. So I'm going to create a Boolean variable, and I'm going to call it invalid. And we're going to keep using that until we get the answer that we're looking for, which is something that is between the lowest and the highest, and both of them are valid in here. So now we have to get our information. So we're going to do a do while loop. So we're going to keep getting information while invalid. Now, a lot of you in the programs put invalid equals true or invalid equals false or things of that nature. And just remember, while that does work, it's not considered good programming. So you want to make sure that you don't do it. And I may have commented on your inside your program itself in Canvas, or I might not. So it's early in the morning for me as well. So please forgive me if I stutter a bit. So let's start off with, we have a function called getNumber. And getNumber is going to return a positive number. So right now, getNumber does absolutely nothing. So I'm going to create that right now. So we need a bool here. And I went the opposite on this one. And we're going to start off with valid number. And I think you'll see why in a minute. But either way is okay. I don't have a preference. I just either choose valid number or invalid number. Sometimes I use need data and have data. It just depends upon the mood I'm in and what kind of code I want to write. But basically, they both do exactly the same thing in here. So we have now, we need our do. And notice that I am not putting in any prompts in here. A lot of you put in enter a positive number, and that's great, except that when you're doing the get the length, get the width, get the diameter, get the radius. How would the user know what to put in? For instance, in get circumference, if you just put in enter a positive number, you're not knowing whether to put in the radius or the diameter. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's really fairly simple. So we need to get the number. So we're going to do a simple cin. Now we're not doing any error checking for bad input in terms of a cin fail or not. And some of you did that, which was not necessary to do. And as you see, the function I'm going to share with you next week that I wrote is going to allow you to do everything through a get line. We're going to be doing strings this week. So you'll see that using get line is so much easier than using a cin. But you'll see that very shortly. So the next thing we need to do here is check to see if the number that we put in is valid. So it's really very simple. Valid number equals, and in parentheses, number is greater than 0. Now, some of you put in if number is greater than 0, valid number equals true, else valid number equals false. Yes, that does the exact same thing, but this is a better way of doing it as well. So we have a error here, expected while, because we don't have a while, well, that would make sense. So let's put the while. And in this particular case, we want to do not valid number. So let's put in comments. This is like saying valid number equals false. But this is the preferred way of doing things. If you didn't do it that way, I did not take off. I may have put in a comment to tell you in here. So this looks really good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get the menu selection. And I already have the menu display in here already written, so I don't have to take time writing in here. So the very first thing that we need to do in get selection, and I know some of you did it in main, but this is probably the easier way of doing it. So let's type in display menu here. And then we're going to put in enter your menu choice. Notice the space here and notice that there is no end L. So then what we need to do is check to see if what the user puts in is valid or not. So because we're displaying the menu in here and because we're getting the selection inside the get selection, we need our cin. And now we need to check it. So invalid selection equals, and our two choices are if it's less than the lowest, or, notice I said or and not and, higher than the highest. So some of you had lost points because you did not put that in parentheses. So you want to always make sure that you put it in parentheses. So our choices are right over here, that selection is less than lowest. And that's or. Selection is greater than highest. So we're checking in here to see if the menu choice is invalid. So what you can do is give the user a opportunity to understand what happened. So we're going to do if. Now some of you did this. If invalid equals true. That's not necessary to do. So just do if invalid. That's basically the exact same thing in here. And it's the preferred way of doing it. And I haven't done it on the other ones, but let's just put the if here. Then we'll give the user a message that says see out, invalid selection, and then you could always put another thing, valid selections are lowest and through highest, or whatever you want to put. But for time, place, let's just put in invalid selection, and then I'm going to put in a message, please re-enter, and then we need an end out. Remember, end out is preferred over the escape new line character because it clears the buffer. If you're going to have 4 or 5 sentences together, like this one here, I've got the new line, I've got the new line, I've got the new line, but notice how I end it here with an end out. So that's fine in here, just as long as you have end out at the end, and that's perfectly fine. So let's go in here and let's just run this right now to see if we're getting a good menu selection. So we need to return selection, and then let's go to our main where it says choice equals here, and we need a process choice, but we'll get to care of that shortly. So let's go in here and just do a C out choice, and then what we'll do here is do a system pause, so we don't have to worry about going through anything else. So I'm constantly doing something and then checking it, doing something and checking it. So if I have an issue right from the very beginning, I want to make sure that I find it. So let's go and do a couple things on the menu and see if it works. So the first thing is it displays a menu, so that's a good thing. So I'm going to hit 6 to see if it doesn't work. So you always want to do one higher than the highest valid and one lower than the lowest valid. So let's start off with 6 and see if we get that message. Okay, invalid selection, please re-enter. Then let's go and do 0 and see if that works. So now we know we have good valid selection in here. So let's just do 1 and see if we do indeed turn 1. And we have a 1 in here, so that's good. So now we know that we have choices 1, everything's good. So let's just try it with 3. And it does 3. So we're good here. So right now there's some cosmetic things. It's because it's looking at the choice and the system pause, and we're don't really care about that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to put in our process selection. So how do we actually understand if process choice is true? So very simple, that we're going to process it if choice is not sentinel. So notice that we have while choice is not sentinel, but if we technically right now, if we put in sentinel value, which is 5, it's still going to do process selection. So that's why we have if process choice. So what we need to do here is we need to process choice. Now this was not required, but this is the way you would want to run the program. Process choice equals choice does not equal sentinel. So let's just go test this out. It says if process choice, we're going to process selection. Let's put in an else, and we'll say see out no process. So now we're accomplishing 2 things. We're not going into process choice if we don't need to go into process choice, but we're also checking to see if our sentinel is working. So let's go and run that and see what happens. And let's just type in 5, and we should see no process, unless there's something wrong. If there is, then we go back and fix it. So we have 5. I'm not sure why we have this extra 5, so that took care of that. So it's got no process. Okay, so we're looking good here. Everything's working fine. So we can get rid of this. We know that this works. And we know that process choice is there. So now what we need to do is start on our process choice going into the process selection. So the first one, I believe, is get the area of a rectangle. So it's fairly simple. So let's go to, get the process selection, area rectangle. So we have case 1. So the first thing is I need area of a rectangle here. So the area of rectangle, we're going to need the length and the width in here. So let's go and let me go to my notes. So what we're going to need here in the process, we're going to need to go to get area of rectangle. So it's really very simple. So we have area of rectangle, and area of rectangle is strictly equals get area of rectangle. Now, we did not have to pass anything in here right now, because we're going to do that and get area of rectangle. So let's go to get area of rectangle. And notice I have the length, the width, and the area already set. So what we need to do here is tell the user what we need to do. So let's just do cout what is the length of the rectangle. And then we'll do length equals get number. So we're going to get a positive number there. And let me put in a space. Then we'll do the same thing with width. So we change this to width and change this to width. And then what we'll do here is we'll put in the area equals, in parentheses, length times width, and I probably spelled length wrong. Now, it is okay. It's just more readable if you do it this way, return area. You could have done return length times width. I prefer that you do it this way, but if you did it return length times width, I did not take off. But just bear in mind, you always want to make your program more readable. So you're not saving any memory or anything by doing it this way, but it does make it more readable. So the program called to print that in the switch statement. So if you printed it in get area rectangle, you probably got a comment about it and you may have lost some points over that. So let's go back to our switch statement. We're going to test this here, and we'll do cout the area of the rectangle is area rectangle. Now, one of the things I noticed was several of you put cout the area of the rectangle is get area of rectangle. Well, while that works just fine, remember you're always going to want to check your program guidelines, which says do not calculate inside a cout. When you become very comfortable with C++ and things of that nature, that's a great way of doing things. But still, either way, this makes the program more readable than the other way. So let's test this one now and see what happens. So we're going to test in 1. And I do not know why I'm getting this delay here. And obviously we have the pause in here. So what is the length of it? So let's do 10 and 20. And the area of the rectangle is 200. So that works out good. And let's hit 5 and see what happens. And we're done. So that's good. All right, so we're now back here. And I put in no process equals goodbye. So since I made that change, it's a good idea to always test it. So let's go in and see what happens if I go and do just put in set no value, and let's do 5 and see if it says no process goodbye. So it says no process goodbye. So everything works just fine. So our next one is to do the get the radius of a circle. So that's going to be almost the same thing as the area, but we only need to get the radius and return the radius. So let's go back to our switch statement. So we have a radius here already. And one of the things we probably don't need to do is make this 0.0. So because they're integers, and this is an integer. So let's go and change those. So the next thing we need to do is radius equals get radius. And we'll do a cout the radius of the circle is radius, and make sure we have the end out. So now we need to write get radius, which is very simple. So let's go to get radius, and we have our integer radius in here. So now we need to tell the user what we're going to get. Cout what is the radius, which I spelled wrong. Let's try that one more time. Of the circle, question mark and a space. Notice no end L. And then we're going to do radius equals get number. So we're using get number a lot. And we're going to return radius. So let's go back to our switch statement. And this looks good. So this time we're going to do 2, and let's see if everything works out just fine. So we're going to put into what is the radius of the circle. So let's put in 25, and hopefully it returns 25. So that's good, and we will exit. So I am going to put this on pause, and I'm going to process this video so I can keep it at a simple length. Right now we're at 23 minutes. So let me put it on pause. Let me process this video, and then we'll pick up on selection number 3.